So let's talk about how you actually get that money back. This is what everybody wants to know, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of the State Private Nonprofit Organizations Assistance Program. In 2007, it was Assembly Bill 903 that was approved and signed in October of that year by Governor Schwarzenegger to allow for reimbursement of nonprofit organizations for extraordinary costs incurred during a disaster recovery effort. The regulations to accompany that were never written. Well, up until we had the 2010 storms. And emergency legislation was then brought to bear because it was recognized that the nonprofits would have to be involved. And actually, I was saying to Eric the other day, it was kind of fun to recognize that someone in California was seeing that whole community approach before it was a concept at FEMA. So yay, California, leading the way again. During the storm recovery efforts, the regulations were actually written throughout the process. Things changed throughout, and I am so happy to tell you instead of the 12 forms I had to fill out, you only have 4. It's so much easier, and I'm so happy to be able to see this new process. Out of that came our program that we're going to talk about today, and that I hope I hope you never get to implement it, because I hope you never have a disaster that you have to respond to. But the reality is we most likely will. So this will help you be more prepared for it. Now, these are all the details to it as far as where you find this in Barclay's California Code of Regulations. But there's enough information provided here, and actually on CalEMA's website they have some great resources that we'll refer to a little bit later too. But I have to caution you, and this was specifically requested by my contact at CalEMA. She said, please tell them, do not consider this an avenue for funding. It is strictly reimbursement for costs previously incurred. So this is not we need money because we'd like to do. It's we spend the money, we do, and then they will reimburse for certain eligible activities. It is actual cost because you do need to have documentation. You need receipts for everything. So, what makes you an eligible organization? Primarily, you must be a 501c3. Now, Santa Barbara County VOAD is in the same situation as Orange County COAD. Not a 501c3. So the VOAD is not eligible to submit, but you as individual nonprofits are. In talking with Eric, there's probably going to be some discussion going forward about potential for one of the nonprofits in the group to take that intermediary role, but that's a discussion for another day. So we're going to talk primarily about the individual private nonprofits, and for brevity's sake, private nonprofit is PNP. You must be responding to a request from the local agency and providing essential community services that's defined as including but not limited to food, water, and shelter. And as we discovered in our experience, debris removal was included. Religious organizations, Operation OC is a faith-based group, can participate because we're providing resources that are not related to religious programming. So it's just a restriction that federal or state funds cannot be used for religious programming. But like Salvation Army is a faith-based group, but they provide shelter. That's not religiously oriented. So encourage your faith-based groups in the county to participate with you in this. So let's look at it by phases. The preparedness phase, of course, you're developing your own capabilities, and we're assuming that everyone understands the need for personal and organizational preparedness. But as you develop your capabilities within your county, really critical to all of this is developing a relationship with your local emergency management. In Orange County, we have a wonderful relationship with our Orange County Sheriff's Department. I attend a monthly meeting of the Orange County Emergency Management Organization. So I want to ask you, where do you interact with your local emergency managers? Your capabilities, your training and exercising, building relationships, talking with your local emergency managers, certainly to know the emergency manager within your city as well as the county, because you will need to have a written agreement with a local agency, whether it's a city or county level, You must have a written agreement with them. Now, that can be drafted during the preparedness phase, and there are advantages and disadvantages to signing the agreement before the disaster event, because it does ask for you to specify what your requirements are. What are you doing in response to this disaster? If that varies from disaster to disaster, you might want to just have that agreement drafted and then sign it once the event occurs. Operation OC always has the responsibility to maximize access to community resources. That's pretty generic and can apply to any disaster. So we have our agreement already signed with the county. Intermediary private nonprofits, there are additional requirements, particularly in having a written agreement with those nonprofits that you're coordinating. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. There are guidance documents in development at the state. Our new Cal EMA Secretary, Mark Ghilarducci, has been part-time up until this month. He's come full-time into the Secretary's position as of June 2012. Those draft guidance documents, not really templates, but guidance documents are on his desk. May take him a little while to get to them as he steps into this full-time, but we hope to have that to deliver to nonprofits throughout the state. But on the next slide here, I want to give you just a picture of our Operation OC website, because we do have our agreement with our county and with our partners up on our website. The top arrow points down to the Partners tab that you would see from the home page. On the left side, the arrow points to the Resources link within the Partners page. And then down at the middle of that page, they're both the county and partner agreements. So you can take a look at those. Ours are much more extensive than the template that the state has offered at this point. So go as extensive as we have, or you can minimize it down to the level that the state template offers. So take your pick, what works for you. So response phase. Of course, you're going to respond and activate in response to that request from your local agency. You're going to be providing those essential community services, and I have to tell you, those can vary from event to event. Debris removal was a key activity during the winter storms. It might not be for the next event we experience. And if you did not yet sign that written agreement, this is the time to do it. It must be signed within 30 days of the date of the governor's proclamation. So the signed agreement must be executed within 30 days of the governor's proclamation. Now, the work must be completed within a time frame that is established by your local agency, has to be completed within 6 months of the governor's proclamation, unless you have prior written approval to go longer than that. It, of course, must relate directly to that state of emergency and be providing resources to the community impacted. And then, of course, has to comply with all state and federal regulations, so no discrimination, no use of federal funds for religious purposes. Now down to what actually can qualify as essential community services. We did talk about the debris removal. It's kind of interesting because most of our work, you might hear referred to by categories. Category A is debris removal. Everything else we do is Category B, emergency protective measures. That includes sandbagging, it includes sheltering, it includes provision of food, water, and ice. And then any other essential services that the state deems essential for that event. For the intermediary private nonprofits, the coordination of their other nonprofit organizations qualifies as emergency protective measures. And there is a FEMA disaster assistance policy 9523.15 that tells you a whole lot more about the sheltering aspect, but to give you a brief rundown, it covers reimbursement for expenses related to facilities, whether that's a school, stadium, church, supplies and commodities. If you need to go out and buy more cots because you have more shelter residents than you were prepared for. Pay for regular employees. That's only for overtime. The state will not reimburse for regular time, it's only overtime, and I've provided some links to documents that can help you document that. Applicant-owned equipment, so if you have bus or other transportation equipment, emergency medical services for the shelter residents, transportation, safety and security for the shelter itself, the cost of restoring the facility back to its pre-shelter state, and animal sheltering falls under this category also. So take a look at that FEMA disaster assistance policy for more details on all of those. All of the costs must be extraordinary, above and beyond your day-to-day expenses. They must be documented with receipts, dates, days of service, sites that you've served in, the number of people serving, the hours that they served, all of that. And then if you have inventory pre-event that you expend during the response, if you have that documented, it may be eligible for reimbursement. So, just document everything. There's a chance you'll get some money back. So, things that are not eligible, of course, anything that is against state or federal constitution, law, or regulation. Donated resources, of course, if it doesn't cost us anything, we will not be reimbursed anything for it. And again, having to do with those resources, if you receive donations of resources on the day of or after the first day of the incident period, those are not reimbursable. Things that you received as donations prior to that, if you've documented, may be reimbursable. Volunteer labor is a donation by definition and is not reimbursable. Any monetary relief that we provide is not reimbursable. The state or federal government provides that in certain situations. If they are not providing it, they will not reimburse us for providing it. So they've already made that determination. And of course, as we said, with debris removal and emergency protective measures, that does not include any repair or permanent restoration.
On emergency protective measures, your local emergency management will help you out with that, because it's very important that it's just that. Many jurisdictions try to stretch that out into be something more sustainable. It is literally taking those immediate actions to save particularly property or lives, but mainly property, and it's not something that would go on. So again, to underscore that you need to be in very close coordination with your emergency management officials. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing certain things which may not be eligible for reimbursement. You have to be very careful on that term.
Yes, and that goes back to responding to the request of that local agency. Then you don't go outside that request. So some additional things that are not reimbursable: damage caused by intent or negligence, and then anything that the state hasn't provided. If they normally provide it, but they have chosen not to in this situation, they will not reimburse for that. So be cautious on that.